What are silly Mualani's biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. I'm going to start things off by saying that she has many team options. I consider this to be one of her best qualities. You're able to pair her with multiple different types of characters and do pretty well with her. If you don't have Moika, then you can easily get by just fine by using Xiangling. You're able to pair her with Sit Lolly, but she's not a must by any means. And yet, she's still able to amazingly utilize Emily if you so choose, because she's able to take advantage of Burn Vape, since the burning aura will be sustained on enemies, allowing her to vape consistently. Or you could even consider using her with Shilonen. To be fair, most characters do work with the DJ Cat, but either way, the point still stands that she's a viable Mualani teammate. It's kinda clunky to do so, but Sucrose works as well and is actually one of her better free-to-play friendly team options. And you can even make use of Candice if you so freaking choose. There is genuinely quite a lot of team options to her. And shoot, you don't even have to play her as the main DPS. Sticking her on TDDS and Cinder City makes her a viable Skirk support. You heard that right, she can be a viable Skirk support. And shoot, you can even use Nahida thanks to her provision of EM to the character that's currently on field. This character has options, and a whole lot of them. This was the case on her release, and it's genuinely only got better over time. Now that she's having her first rerun, she has more teams than ever to work with now that the full Not Long cast has released. In my humble opinion, this makes her good for both veteran and new players alike. If you're somebody that has a ton of characters, then you're likely going to be able to combine one very strong team for her, and if you're somebody that's just starting out, or perhaps your account is only a couple of months old, you'll still be able to throw together something effective for Mualani. This is especially relevant when you consider that we have plenty of good main carries nowadays, but a lot of them do really want one or two particular teammates. Skirk is one of the most recent examples of this. She really wants a Scoffier in order to perform at her max potential, or somebody like Kniech. I wouldn't say he's as teammate locked as Skirk is, but even so, he definitely performs a lot better consistently when you have Emily. You're basically just always going to be firing out more cannon shots with him if you have the Perfumer by your side. The Shark Surfer just simply doesn't really feature such issues. She's able to work with so many different characters, and relatively effectively too. So I'd say that if you're somebody with a rather scattered roster, or perhaps you pulled plenty of Not Long supports, then Mualani may not even be a bad pickup for you. In fact, I would actually encourage you get her in such a case. Assuming that you don't already have main DPSs utilizing said supports, because she's very good with them. She's also an absolutely excellent single target DPS. It's where she shines best, against boss content. I will say now she is perfectly fine against multi-target, as long as there's about 3 targets or less. I wouldn't really go above that with her. But even so, she's amazing against bosses. Her single target damage output is really impressive in Vape. I wouldn't particularly attribute this as anything too special, because we have plenty of good characters nowadays that are amazing boss killers, but even so, if you're somebody that's in need of one, and you want one sooner rather than later, then yes, she's definitely not a bad choice to do so, especially since once again, there's a high chance that you'll be able to form a team just using whatever's on your account right now, and be able to get the job done. As long as the boss isn't hydro resistant, you should be perfectly fine. I'd also just like to highlight how accessible she generally feels. You're able to put her on a Ring of Yasha and get by just fine, which is the Not Long craftable catalyst. And even on a team of full 4 stars, you're still gonna do pretty well with her. Because of this, she ends up feeling like quite a beginner-friendly pull in my opinion. I also personally believe that playing her just isn't really that difficult. She's very straightforward, and I feel like if you're not that experienced, you'll be able to jump into playing her pretty easily. And I think one of my personal favorite pros about this Shark Surfer, simply because it was just so unexpected, I personally did not see this coming at all, but she ended up becoming a very good Skirk support. Put her on R5 TDDS, 4-piece Cinder City, and she is a surprisingly good swap-in. Granted, you don't really have to pull her specifically for this role. It's more something that I would use if you happen to pull Mualani for other reasons, because there is very much other teammates you can use in her place. And within Skirk's best installed team, which would of course be the Abyss Lady, Lady Farina, Shenhe, and Escoffier, there is of course no Mualani there. But with that being said, if you don't have Shenhe, which is a pretty realistic situation considering that that's a niche cryo support, then Mualani is a perfectly good slot in. Does it sound ridiculous? Absolutely. But does it still work? Also absolutely. It is surprisingly strong despite how absurd it sounds. This character was designed to be a main DPS through and through, and doesn't feature any supportive capabilities within her kit. However, despite all this, she still somehow ended up acquiring this use case. And the reason why this is actually quite a nice thing about her, and it's not really just something small that I want to brush under the rug, is because Skirk is very strong at the moment if you have a Scoffier. She is a very good cryo DPS. In fact, the best one, and one of the top 5 best DPSs in the game. Being able to support a character like that is pretty impressive. And while I don't usually care if a character isn't best in slots, I will once again say, most of Skirk supports are pretty generalist, except for Shenhe. That is a unit that I very much can see most people not having. So not only would you be getting yourself quite a good Hydro DPS that's able to take care of bosses very easily, but you'd also be getting yourself a character that's able to double as a support for a very strong DPS, and do a pretty good job at it, much to everyone's surprise. I actually consider that to be quite the increase to her value since her last banner. All around, that's another thing that I want to point out. She's only gained more and more flexibility with her teammates and build ever since her last banner, and I think that's a pretty noteworthy thing to consider. However, unfortunately, there are indeed still some cons to this Skirk Surfer, and I think the biggest one is honestly competition. Setting Nod Krai aside for a minute, if we just take a look at Hydra DPSs, we of course have everybody's favorite Novalet, Mr. Settle Down himself. Now, when the Skirk Surfer was first coming out, people were thinking that perhaps she would end up being better than him, if not at least on the same level, but to be honest, because that guy just has such a wide array of amazing teams, and he's just able to consistently perform every time, he still ended up being a better Hydro DPS than her. So while I would say that her individual qualities have improved over time, I would say that her overall value has actually somewhat decreased. I don't necessarily want to say that definitively, because being able to support Skirk is very much something that Novalet cannot do. But even so, just looking at them as plain Hydro DPSs, the Hydro Dragon still comes out on top. And then if we take a look at every DPS that is released within Notlan, or just every character that has come out during the Notlan patch cycle, she actually doesn't end up stacking up that much anymore. Melt Moika, the best DPS in the game, the best team in the game. Varessa, the best electro carry in the game, and just one of the best carries in the game right now in general. Skirk, if you have all of her tools, also one of the best carries in the game right now. Kenichi Nahal with Emily, if you're able to play him well, then goodness me, that guy is an absolute beast in single target. Ahau, of course, he's the beast. Novalet gains a really good, competent new team every 5 minutes. So even though Mualani is good, she actually isn't really stacking up against this game's best DPSs at the minute. I will say I somewhat sound like I'm underselling her right now. I should add her damage is still very much very good. It's not that she's super unimpressive or anything. She definitely does still perform to quite a high standard. And I really want to emphasize that you're not going to be disappointed by her damage numbers, especially if you invest a little bit. However, it's not that Mualani is bad, it's that our competition is ridiculously overtuned. We just have super strong DPSs in the game at the minute, and it's really, really hard to justify getting her over all of the current DPSs that we have in the meta right now. I would still put her above the average Fontaine DPS. She does outperform the average Fontaine character, and that is for sure. However, when it comes to the average Notlan DPS, we just have better options. And then there's of course Novalet, but we already know the case with him. So objectively speaking, she has to compete against another Hydro DPS who's just a lot more useful in general, and she also has to compete against every other Notlan DPS who just does more damage than her. What she has over them is that she isn't really locked to any specific teammates, and that is indeed great. But with that being said, if you have those specific teammates, then suddenly getting her just feels a whole lot less valuable. There's also Nod Krai, but you yourself have to decide whether you care about those characters or not, and whether you're interested in saving for them or not. I wouldn't necessarily say that directly impacts Mualani's value. Genshin impacts it even. However, it is still the case that she is getting a rerun right before a brand new region is dropping with some very, very good looking characters. So I would be very critical of asking yourself, do you really need Mualani? And is she actually adding that much to your account right now? Because there are plenty of good damage dealers, and Nod Krai is only going to raise the bar again. And finally, she's mid in AOE. She's fine if there's 2 to 3 targets, but anything more than that, and just, yeah, no. She can still deal with these situations fine, and it's nowhere near as bad as Chaska, who literally divides up her bullet shots per enemy. That's just really cooked. But even so, she is definitely more suited to lower target scenarios, and I wouldn't bring her into an abyss where there's lots of enemies at once. She's definitely not built for mobbing. I would specifically consider her if you're somebody that really needs a character that's able to deal with 2 to 3 target scenarios or boss scenarios. Boss scenarios specifically, I would really like to emphasize that, but 2 to 3 target is also fine. I think the best way that I can describe Mualani is that she herself has definitely improved. I would say that the qualities that she had originally that made her good, those have only really been built upon. However, she didn't remain as the best DPS in all of Notlan for very long. As time has gone on, we've simply gotten better DPSs, and while I do still think her damage is impressive, you just kinda have to ask yourself, can you really justify investing in her? Now, if you like this character, she is 100% still good, and I will say, I do feel like I'm underselling her a bit in this video, but I just want you to be precautious. Are you actually going to get a lot of use out of her? And do you have any interest in the new region? Consider those, and then make your decision. But either way, she is a good character, and you won't be disappointed with her because her good qualities are still very much there. Hopefully this video was able to tell you Mualani's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out, and in reality, the most logical reason to get her would be for the shark.